Okay. All right. Well, my name is Anthony Williams with Keller Williams, Kerr Living Team, and today I'm joined by Paul Mostak, who is with. Go ahead, Paul. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah. Paul with Absolute Home Mortgage. Been in the mortgage industry for 10 years, been with Absolute for about two. Excited to talk to you guys a little bit more about what you can do to achieve your goals of homeownership in 2025.
Great. Yeah, I actually met Paul at kind of this networking thing. It was one of these typical, they give you some crappy breakfast and there's a bunch of mortgage people there and a bunch of realtors, and then they try to sell you some kind of,
Yep.
thing to email people with or whatever. But whenever I'm at one of those, I do occasionally go. It's just nice to get out of the house,
Yeah.
um, and meet some new people.
Agreed.
So we met and kind of connected. Us being kind of from the same general area, around the same age, and what made you want to get into the mortgage industry? What and kind of going forward, where do you see it going? Do you see kind of more people wanting to get into this industry, and how is it going to grow with technology and things like that?
Yeah. Good question. So I got into the mortgage industry actually when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college, and it was an opportunity for me to break into the workforce in my field that I was studying in college. And I jumped into it, and it was very daunting at first. A lot of different information to understand and know. Um, but grew in different roles throughout my career in the industry. And one of the things that I enjoy is helping people understand their situation to make the best decision possible, right? Because for most people, purchasing a home is the biggest purchase they'll ever make in their life. So it's important to me that they feel informed and educated throughout the process. Because there's nothing like when we're at the table with a set of
Mm-hmm.
buyers and they're
Right.
getting the keys and they're all excited
Yeah.
about their new home.
Right.
Um, so it's such a rewarding career from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I to your other point of technology, technology I think is going to play a huge factor in the mortgage world in the next few years. I mean, it already has impacted things so greatly.
Sure. Yeah.
um, I actually had a company seminar yesterday where we talked about being able to like underwrite a file in 5 minutes
Yeah.
from our phone,
Right. Yeah.
like, which is crazy.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whenever I'm typing anything in, I'm just like, why am I not just taking a picture of this and it's all done for me? Like, come on,
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think that's kind of where we're headed. But I always laugh when you're at the table and you have the stack of papers.
yeah.
That'll never change, right? For whatever reason, it's just the
Well,
giant stack of sign, sign, sign. Yeah.
believe it or not, that is getting better too.
Okay.
So we
Good.
actually do hybrid closings now,
Okay.
where
Yeah.
like you can e-sign a portion of those documents
Right.
before closing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are
Yeah.
obviously the certain ones.
Inevitable. Certain ones they need that
Yep.
ink to paper. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, Well, great. I read an article recently. It was shared with me by Tim Kerr, our team leader, and we actually had a discussion today on our morning call. And the average age of a first-time home buyer today is 38 years old. Now, you being in the industry, maybe you already knew that, but why do you think that is? I mean, that's a lot higher than maybe most people think, or that it's been, I don't have this stats right in front of me, but, going back 10, 15, 20 years, you're talking about a decade difference, from when our parents were buying their first home. So if you could speak to kind of why that is and maybe what people can do so they're not 38 years old buying their first home and they're 28 or 30.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? The first one that sticks out in my mind
Mm-hmm.
is inflation overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the cost of goods just increasing. That a lot more people now buy things on credit, right?
Right.
And so when you're buying things on credit, that raises your debt,
Hmm.
right? Which limits, um, how far your income can go when we're looking at someone's financial situation.
Right. Right.
Um, Good.
Oh no, I was going to agree with you there. I mean, I think that there are those factors that can be a little bit out of our hands. Inflation is up. It costs more to buy a home.
Yep.
I think that as a realtor, the conversation that I try to have with people is they have to adjust their expectation a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and you know everyone gets pissed off if you tell people to stop buying avocado toast, right? That's you don't want to sound like an old person, but you have to. I think a lot of people, they if they grow up in a Cherry Hill or a Haddonfield or more, it's not like any nice suburb, and maybe they grew up in a 4-bedroom home with a finished basement, and you see the life that your parents have, and you want that life, at 25 or 30, but it took your parents decades to build that life, and you
Yep.
you don't remember when they were sitting there in their 1-bedroom apartment because you weren't there. How could you?
Right.
you
Right.
know
Right. Right.
but I think that the conversation I try to have with people, and it's hard because you don't want to come off as insensitive or offend anyone, but you have to adjust what you're looking for because you have to start somewhere.
Yep.
You're just not going to go from like the home I described just now to the same exact home.
Yep.
Maybe you need to start looking in a Lindenwald, a Belmar. I'm not saying you have to live in Camden,
Right.
but looking at Oak Lynn's another one. There's kind of these small towns that they have certain charms. They have parades, they have downtown
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they have things like that, and also the size of your home. If it's just you or just you and a spouse, or maybe you and your wife, kid, you don't need 4 bedrooms and the basement and a 2-car garage. And that might be frustrating for someone, but you get that now. I mean, even if it's a town that you don't really want to be in, you're like, hey, I don't want my kids to go to this town. Well, guess what? If your kid was just born, they're not going to go to school for 5 years anyway,
Right. Right.
So 5 years from now, you're going to be in a much better position.
Yeah. Buy
So
the starter home, right?
buy the
In those
start.
types of
I think buy
areas.
the start. Grit your teeth. Pick up the paintbrush. Some people get annoyed when you're like, well, just bootstraps, but you do have to do that to a certain level, unless you're an immensely successful person,
Right.
which
Right.
there are people like that. But yeah, I think if more people take on that challenge, then you'll see that drop a little bit, and those other kind of more broad uh, factors as well. I mean, what mistakes do you think people make as new home buyers, that you kind of see often?
I think the biggest one that stands out is credit, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of people don't understand credit, and I think what happens is people get caught up in, oh, TJ Maxx is having a sale,
Yeah.
they're offering 10% off
Hmm.
if you open up this credit card.
Right.
Well, the problem is then you put $500 on the credit card, right? And maybe you pay it down but don't pay it off, and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden you're
Right.
accruing late payments on that,
Right.
right?
Right.
And this affects your credit score, and
Yeah.
one late payment can drop your credit
And
score
store credit
60
cards are
points.
the worst, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
never get a store credit card. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we all done that. Like, you're doing your Christmas shopping at 18, 19 years old, and you're like at the Macy's buying your girlfriend perfume, and they're like, "Do you want to open up a Macy's credit card?" And you're like,
Right.
"Well, yeah, why
Sure.
wouldn't I?" Yeah, yeah.
Is that
So
going to cut costs?
yeah, yeah. They're
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, do you not want to save $50?
Right. Right.
Yeah, uh,
So and then what happens is you have this a Rolodex of credit cards,
right,
and you don't know which one has a balance, right? Which one's still opened, and
right.
it just becomes too complicated to track.
Yeah.
So if you can limit to maybe 2 to 3 credit cards,
Hmm.
right, that you monitor,
Yeah.
always have them set to direct pay the full balance, right? So if you can, so that way you don't carry a balance over to the next statement period, right?
Yeah.
All those types of things will help to benefit and increase your score.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's crazy. People have so many credit cards and so many subscriptions, which isn't exactly a credit card, but it's like the cousin of a credit card. Like,
Right.
they have these all these apps now that, because people are so maxed out up to their eyeballs in subscriptions and credit cards, that this is going to track all your stuff. And I think those things are good, but it kind of speaks to how unorganized and just chaotic people's finances are. Is that we need an app to tell us about our other apps that we
Right.
have.
Right. Right.
You know,
The
it,
subscription thing is like
yeah,
that is really starting to become a problem,
yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
insane because everything's a prescription. Like, you can't buy a pair of underwear without them being like, "Well, do you want us to ship 6 pairs of underwear each month?" I'm like, "No, like I've been wearing the same underwear for years.
right.
Like,
Right.
ask my wife."
Right. Subscribe to our newsletter.
Yeah, yeah. Subscribe. Oh, like the subscribe and the yeah, yeah. It's exhausting. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Um. So going back a few years, rates were at 3%. Some people got it under that. You know, three and a quarter, 4%. Um, what do you say to the people that have a home that they're in now, that their interest rate is 3%, and they feel like they're outgrowing that home, and but they feel a little trapped because they're like, well, I don't want to lose this low interest rate. What's their move from here?
Yeah. So maybe they could do like a home improvement loan where they maybe take out a home equity line, right? To take, they probably are sitting on a good amount of equity, right, in their house, that they could tap into to get 100,000, 200,000, maybe build an addition on to add an extra bedroom or a
Right.
bathroom.
Yeah.
Um, if they really want to keep that low interest rate. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too, like coupled with the previous point that we just talked
Mm-hmm.
about credit, right,
Right.
is there are so many people that have debt outside of the mortgage payment, right, that
Mm-hmm.
equates to thousands of dollars a month,
Yeah.
where like they could do a cash out refinance, right, pay off a bunch of debt,
Mm-hmm.
and even though they're taking their interest rate like higher,
Mm-hmm.
their total monthly payments is actually substantially lower,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's another thing to,
Yeah.
to, to look at.
Right.
So, but I'd say, if they really don't want to, if they're outgrowing the current home, right,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to leave that
Yeah.
area, then the best way is to do maybe like some sort of second mortgage where they can borrow against the equity and keep that initial interest rate on the first.
Sure. Absolutely. So do you now? What are rates at today?
Rates are on conventional loans were, probably low 7%, high six in some scenarios,
Okay.
and then FHA, VA were like mid 6%, which is nice. Um, so there's still challenging
Still
number.
up there. Yeah, I mean, it's still, makes people wince when they hear those numbers compared to what they just had, and like people have so much agony over, oh, if I should have done this, I should have done that, but you can't, you drive yourself crazy. Um,
Yep.
do you see, I know no one has a crystal ball here, but just your personal opinion. I mean, do you see these rates coming down, this year? By the end of the year, if we're having the same conversation, what does that look like?
I do think that we'll see rates start to fall some this year. Do I think we're going to get back to that 3 and 4%? No,
Yeah.
I hope,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but I don't think it's out of the realm to see them come down to where we were in like September timeframe of last year, which
Right.
was like high fives in some scenarios, low sixes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think like on the interest rate point, right? Like I think the biggest thing for people to start to like shift their mindset to look at is what is the payment that they're comfortable living in, right?
Right.
You don't live in a $400,000 house. You live in a, $3,000 monthly payment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think when you start to look at the situation from that mindset, right,
Right.
it becomes much easier to determine your kind of reality
It's a
and
little
what's
bit
going on.
easier to comprehend
Yeah,
in that sense. Yeah.
yeah,
One thing I definitely wanted to ask you about, because I remember from when we had coffee, was you were talking about the buy down program, and if you could just kind of explain that to me again, because it sounded like something that maybe some of my buyers could really take advantage of.
sure. So I really believe in the buy down program. We offer it absolutely. It's called a 2-1 buy down. It was something that kind of resurfaced a couple of years ago in like 2022, but wasn't really applicable to that market
Mm,
because of the huge influx of buyers, right?
right.
And so you weren't really getting seller concessions.
Hmm.
And for the most part today, you still aren't, right, but
Right.
I'm seeing that scenario become more relevant where you can.
Hmm.
And so I think for specific clients, and especially during the winter buyers, right, where you are looking at a house, right, that maybe you're considering offering $10,000 less than the list price, right? So
Hmm.
let's say it's 500,000 and you're thinking about offering 490,
Right.
right? I A bigger benefit to the client, right, would be to offer at the full list price, right, and ask for a $10,000 seller concession, right?
Hmm.
So that seller's still netting the 490,
Hmm.
right? But now that buyer can take the seller concession of 10,000, apply it towards a buy down program, right? And they're looking at an initial interest rate in year one that is 2% less than what the market is, right?
Hmm.
So if you're at 7% and your interest rate in year one's 5%, that's a substantial difference in your monthly payment, saving you a couple $100 a month, right?
Hmm.
Whereas you going $10,000 under the list price is probably going to save you $50 in your
Uh-huh.
payment,
Right.
right? So, simple way to restructure our offer, but give the client like a massive benefit,
Hmm.
especially first time home buyers, right?
Hmm.
It's a great way to ease into that mortgage payment.
Hmm.
Um, so it, and allows for them to get job promotions, bonuses, right?
Hmm.
So that way, as the interest rate climbs, right? Because so how it happens is it's 2% lower in year one, so 5%, right? In year two, it goes to 6%, and then year 3 to 30, it's back to that 7% market rate.
Hmm.
But the idea, hopefully, is that you can refinance out of it into a
Right.
lower rate before
Hmm.
it gets back to that 7%.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I think that that's something that people sometimes forget. Again, if you're getting that starter home, or even if it's more of a forever home or a in between somewhere, that rate that you have is not going to be around. That's not going to be your rate for the end of time. The
yep,
mortgage that you have is not going to be the same for forever. I mean, my mortgage, I've had my house for 8 years. The cost of my monthly mortgage has changed like 9 different times,
yep.
between getting different homeowners insurance and getting refinance and all these things that,
Property
yeah,
tax changes,
property
right?
tax changes, just because your mortgage is $3,000, it doesn't mean it's going to be 3,000. It's like you saying, okay, well, that wallpaper in the kitchen of the cows, that has to stay the same. No, it doesn't.
Yep,
You can
yep,
change that.
yep.
Um, so what I want to do now is we can kind of take our, mortgage guy and our realtor hats off for a minute and just kind of talk about living here in South Jersey.
Yeah,
I think that you have a lot of people that are coming from North and Central Jersey that are kind of seeing more affordability in South Jersey, more space. You get a bigger backyard, you get that extra bedroom, you have that 2-car garage, where that same house in, Mercer County or Middlesex County or Bergen County, if you're talking about way up in North Jersey, is insanely expensive. The closer you get to New York City, the more expensive, the prices the homes get.
yep.
So just talk about, maybe you could give me your top three things that you love about living in South Jersey? A couple things that you like to do.
Yeah, sure. So, um, I, one of the things that I love about living in South Jersey, and especially around here, right, is quick access to the city, right, major highways, transportation. Um, so you can get to the shore in an hour. You
Yeah,
can get over to Philadelphia in 10 to 15 minutes,
yeah,
right? Um, it's you can also actually quickly hop on 295 and get up to the NJ Transit and get into New York City.
yeah.
Um, so I also like especially around this area where it kind of has that mix of like because it's there's so much to do around here,
Hmm.
right? And there's certain things depending on the area you live in where you can walk right to
Right.
certain places.
Yeah,
Like if you're in Haddon Township and you can walk on Haddon Ave to a restaurant,
yeah,
right? But it's got like the pros and cons of both worlds, where it's got the
yeah.
suburban living,
Yes.
but you don't live in the city and you
Yeah.
don't have to drive a half hour to find a parking spot,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, um, that those are definitely some of the things that I like the most. And to your point, right, like you can find a place where you're surrounded by a ton of folks, but you can also drive a half hour further south, right,
Yeah.
to like a Woodstown area
Sure.
where
Yeah.
you're getting a property with a lot more land. It's a lot more open,
Yeah.
right? Taxes are lower, so there's so many different benefits.
Yeah. I feel like this is a topic. I mean, because I just love where I live so much. Is one of the reasons I became a realtor, because I just kind of want to share that experience, that life with other people that maybe they're coming over from Philly, or maybe another state. Kind of crazy to think that people are moving into New Jersey because it's so expensive. That's what everyone's, oh, the taxes, but it's because it's a great place to live. I mean,
Yeah.
you just kind of laid all that out. We've all heard, hey, you're this far from the beach, the mountains, the city, Philly, New York, wherever. But yeah, I mean, some of the towns I like the most are Collingswood, Haddon Township, where you have a lot of walkability of the Paco train right there. And even if you're going to more of these rural towns in Gloucester County, the Mullica Hills and the Woodstown you mentioned, there's still a lot to do. There's golf courses down there. And yes, it is a bit of a ride if you want to go to a Phillies game or something, compared to if you're kind of right over the bridge and Haddonfield or Collingswood somewhere. But yeah. So let me get one Haddon Township restaurant or Haddonfield restaurant recommend from you, real
Ooh,
quick.
okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What's a good recommendation for Haddon Township? Um, I would say you can't go wrong with Trano, and you can't go wrong with Poorhouse, right? I think they're both
Yes.
restaurants where they offer a wide array of different
Yeah.
dishes, right?
Yeah.
Um, they can also substitute as a great place to go to just hang out as a bar, but you can also
Absolutely.
go with family, right?
Yes.
Prices are very reasonable.
Hmm.
Um, and if you live in the Haddon Township area, right, it's walkable as well.
Hmm. I'm looking up. I had this restaurant on the tip of my tongue, and I'm like, it's gonna kill me. Uh, that I couldn't remember the name, and I knew it started. Oh, Verona. Okay, so
I think
that
that's in Haddonfield.
yes, that's in
Yep,
Haddonfield. So
that's a good one.
that is past every restaurant we go to. My wife goes, this might be my new favorite restaurant, because there's a lot of them. But yeah, Verona and Haddonfield. If you go there, and then right across from each other, they have the Kings Road Brewing, and
Yep.
then they have the distillery, the Wild Feather Distillery.
Yeah.
That's a very good date night, very good spots there. And then if you keeping the party going, you just walk right down Haddon Ave. You
Yep.
got
Yep.
the taco place, you got
G
PJ's,
Morello's.
Giamarlo's.
Yep.
If you're wanting a little bit more classy, and then if you really want a nice, great dive bar, you go to Brewers. Yeah, that
Yes.
is a
Yes. Make
good
sure you bring
spot.
cash.
Yes, bring cash. And there's actually a clip of Nick Sirianni tending bar there recently.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't see
yeah,
that.
yeah. So That was pretty cool because
Oh,
I used
that
to
is
get when
cool.
I lived over there when I lived with a couple roommates and we used to walk there all the time and it's crazy. It's still a dive, I guess, but it's a lot nicer than it was when we went there. It's like
Yeah.
10 years ago. But
Yep.
well, Paul, this was awesome. Thanks so much for sitting down with me, talking a little bit about mortgages, buying a home, and just kind of living in South Jersey. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, we'll definitely do this again.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on,
Yeah,
Anthony. I really appreciate
absolutely.
it.
All right, signing
See you
off.
guys.
That
That was awesome.
was